truly my pleasure to be here this morning, and thank you all for attending this AUSA breakfast. General Ham, General Swan, General Sullivan, General Wagner, thank you so much for being here. I was going to acknowledge all the general officers in the room, but I noticed a few more attended and senior executives. So in honor of General Ham, I'm going to say all protocols observed. Well, it's been approximately 30 months since the last presentation I've made to this forum, and much has truly transpired since November of 2015. So this morning I want to speak for a few minutes about the transformative efforts the Army National Guard has been making to increase readiness, especially among our priority, our urgent units as we call them. I'd like to give you a quick overview of what I call Army Guard 4.0. You see a slide up here that talks about that evolution from, if you remember one thing about this slide, 1.0, strategic reserve of the nation, to a strategic reserve of the Army, standards-based, incorporating APFT, height, weight, readiness training institutes, Army POIs for reclassification and training, 2.5, incorporating those lessons learned from Desert Storm, Desert Shield, truly transitioning to what in Army Guard 3.0 after 9/11 is really being part of the Army's operational reserve, Army force generation model, long notifications of sourcing, known demand, really operational reserve, filling those. And what I want to talk to you about today is as we move through an inflection point of Army Guard 4.0, which, as General Milley has said in many forums, the Army National Guard and Army Reserve is truly part of the Army's operational force today. And that's the sustained readiness model. That is, maybe you're not going to get a notification of sourcing 2 years ahead of time. If you're in contingency plans, notification of sourcing might be you're mobilized tomorrow, move to your home station. 4 days later, we want you at the MOB station. Very short deployment timeline, and then you've got to meet a combatant commander's timeline. So that's what I want to give you. A quick overview of what this is, Army Guard 4.0. It's our most recent transformation to provide the Army National Guard that the nation requires. Why we need it, what brought us to this new era, and where we're going to go in the future. As I go through my remarks, I will highlight the trust and bond that the Army National Guard has with our soldiers, their families, and their civilian employers, which is essential to our success as an Army National Guard. The Army is an organization comprised of people, and we share our soldiers with their families. One of the key differences between our active component and the reserve components is the fact that we also share our soldiers with their civilian employers. So I guess from that perspective, we should really say the families and civilian employers share their soldiers, their citizen soldiers with us in the Army National Guard in the United States Army. So with a smaller Army, our Army needs an Army National Guard to be more ready with the ability to respond with less notification. Increasing readiness requires more training, which means that some of our soldiers are being asked to train more than the traditional 39 days per year. The Army National Guard has long had a slogan that summarized the number of days that potential recruits would expect to serve or wear the uniform during an average year. I think everybody in this room remembers the slogan, 1 weekend per month and 2 weekends in the summer. And again, I'm sure you've all heard this at some point in time in the last 30 to 40 years. That slogan was easy. It was in a concise way to explain the minimum commitment of reserve component soldiers during the Cold War and when the Army National Guard was that strategic reserve in 1.0 and 2.0. So that works out to 39 days per year, 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks, 15 days in the summer. It's the minimum that a mobilization day guardsman, or M-Day soldiers as we call them, would serve in a given year for collective unit level training. Although 39 days per year has served as our organizational bumper sticker, it's not truly accurate, and it has not been for some time. Even before our response on September 11th, 2001 into the attacks, the Army National Guard soldiers averaged more than 39 days of training per year. In fiscal year 2000, the average was 49 days. In 2008, we reached a peak of an average of 85 training days per year per soldier. And in a 5-year period between 2011 and 2015, the average was nearly 67 days per year. The 39-day model is not the norm of today's Army National Guard. I'll speak a little bit more about what that means and how we are addressing it in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to explain why the extra training days are necessary for many of our soldiers. Prior to my last presentation here, the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Milley, came out to Nashville and spoke at the annual meeting of the National Guard Association of the United States in August 2015. And General Milley posed a question that has driven much of what the Army National Guard has done since then. He asked us and our leaders in the Army National Guard and within the National Guard, do we have the Army National Guard that our Army needs for the 21st century? So in the last 28 months, all components of the Army have worked very closely together, the Army National Guard, and the United States Army Reserve, to assess where we are, to identify what we need to improve, and to develop strategies for the total Army. It's been a busy and very productive time. Through increased collaboration, we have taken actions to increase readiness throughout the United States Army in all three components. Some of it was immediate, but some of it will take time to see the full return on the investment the Army has made into readiness. Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Dr. Mark T. Esper, has made Army readiness among his three focus priorities. And our National Defense Strategy directs us to recapture readiness and increase lethality while remaining interoperable within the joint force. So after considerable introspection, I think we're on the right track of making sure we maximize readiness as a total Army in defense of our nation. And adapting to our national defense needs is not something new to our Army National Guard. We've been doing it since our first militias were established in 1636. So in order to determine what type of Army National Guard we should have in the near term and the long term, I looked at how the Army National Guard transformed throughout history. I especially looked at what I see as several transformations for our force since our nation adopted the all-volunteer force in the early 1970s. That's what the slide depicts. It talks about the years that I see related to those particular transformations, time periods. The top talks about things that influenced, and the bottom talks about key things that particular Army National Guard was at that time, and then where we're going. So in that post-draft era, the Army National Guard has experienced four transformations based on the challenges of the time. Our force has evolved from that strategic reserve that I mentioned earlier that would not likely have been activated to an integral part of the United States Army's operational force. I refer to this fourth transformation as the Army National Guard 4.0. Our Army National Guard is again rapidly moving through an inflection point, and we are adjusting to the Army and the nation's needs. As part of the Army's operational force, we are decreasing mobilization times in order to meet the needs of the time and also as well as potential contingencies. With the smaller Army, our country needs a more prompt response from our citizen soldiers and from our units. Through Army National Guard 4.0, we're developing a force that is more capable for the Army and more responsive to our governors and to the nation. Army Guard 4.0 was not developed in a vacuum. General Milley has led the way, providing the needed guidance and decisions. We've had outstanding collaborations with the Department of the Army, with Forces Command, Training and Doctrine Command, and Army Material Command, just to name a few. And also all 54 of our state adjutants general have provided excellent input and feedback to make sure Army Guard 4.0 is successful and that we can execute it. Throughout their states, our adjutants general ensure that their soldiers improve individual readiness in order to improve unit readiness. In today's Army National Guard, part of the operational force of the Army, our soldiers need to be healthy, physically and mentally fit, qualified on their weapons, and prepared to deploy at short notice. Army National Guard soldiers provide the United States Army with 39% of its combat force and constitutes the largest reserve force in all of the Department of Defense. We comprise 8 of the 18 U.S. Army divisions and 27 of the Army's 58 brigade combat teams. Since attacks on 9/11, we have deployed more than 582,000 Army National Guard soldiers overseas to support mobilizations and deployments. And currently, we have more than 20,200 Army National Guard soldiers mobilized for worldwide deterrence, reassurance efforts, and for enduring missions. Before the end of this fiscal year, we project approximately 25,000 mobilizations in fiscal year 18 alone. So in this current fiscal year, we really start to pull together more elements of Army Guard 4.0. For example, this year we've doubled our combat training center rotations. This year and in future years, we'll have 2 at the National Training Center and 2 at the Joint Readiness Training Center, with approximately 15% of our overall force receiving the high intensity training annually. Just think about it. Nearly 30,000 Army National Guard soldiers will have gained valuable CTC experience this year. We've also placed our Armor Brigade combat teams and Stryker Brigade combat teams on 4-year training and readiness cycles to provide the Army the capacity and capability that it needs within our heavy force. We've also incorporated additional external evaluated training periods in their available year to extend and sustain that company-level proficiency that we acquire through the CTC rotation. We're extending that an additional 12 months so that they reach and sustain that level of readiness through their entire available year if needed. As always, our soldiers train to the same standards as our counterparts in the active component. For a few years, we did not have enough funding available for many of our soldiers to attend professional development schools and annual training with their units in the same year. We've made those changes and corrected that issue. So now we restored funding for Army schools. Even our youngest soldiers can expect obligations to go beyond 39 days as they attend their required professional military education. In addition, we're mobilizing large contingents of Army National Guard soldiers for United States Army missions around the world. This past March, I was in Kuwait for the Task Force Spartan Transfer of Authority between the 35th Infantry Division from the Kansas Army National Guard to the 28th Infantry Division from Pennsylvania. The 28th is our 3rd consecutive Army National Guard division to take command of Operation Spartan Shield, and will soon be joined in that mission by the 155th Armor Brigade Combat Team of the Mississippi Army National Guard. Later this year, Tennessee's 278 Armor Brigade Combat Team, after its CTC rotation, NTC rotation in May, 30 days later began to mobilize and deploy a battalion task force to Poland to fulfill the nation's enhanced forward posture responsibilities within our NATO alliance, to be followed by 9 months later by a 2nd battalion task force. Overseas deployment training opportunities provide additionally the type of collective training and leader development that enhances and sustains readiness, but are difficult, if not impossible, to complete here at home. I do not have the time here today to acknowledge every single unit by name because there are so many active around the world, but let me just highlight a few. New York's 27th Infantry Brigade Combat Team last year participated in Pacific Pathways in Exercise Hamel in Australia, and it will send soldiers to Resolute Castle in Bulgaria and Romania this year. They've also provided 220 New York Army National Guardsmen that are completing a 9-month rotation to the Joint Multi-Training Group Ukraine, and they've been doing that in Tennessee's brigade. We'll also pick that mission up later this year. And Texas Army National Guard soldiers participate in swift response this year, as they did last year, as part of the Associate Unit Pilot Program. In this particular case, it's between the 1st Battalion, 143rd Infantry Airborne, and the 173rd Airborne Brigade. This particular program combines training and integrates active and reserve component formations, which increases aggregate readiness without increasing cost. And truly, AUP, as it's called, which is targeted maneuver support, and maneuver sustainment units equitably, has been a force multiplier for our Army and for our Army National Guard. And 6 of our 13 units participating in the pilot program are transportation or engineer, There are 2 infantry brigade combat teams, 1 striker brigade, 3 infantry battalions, and 1 division headquarters, all involved in the associate unit pilot. This fiscal year, more than 800 soldiers from the Army National Guard will support 8th Army and U.S. Forces Korea in over 9 exercises. Indiana's Army National Guard 76 IBCT will participate in Pacific Pathways, which is the United States Army Pacific's largest exercise in theater. This is the second year, as I mentioned, that we participated in it, but this year will be the first year that Army National Guard is the primary trainees in Pacific Pathways 18.2. So what's this do? The Army National Guard's involvement in these exercises improves interoperability with our allies and partners, unified land operations, and peacekeeping operations. But for us in the Army National Guard, it's about sustaining readiness and developing the leadership within our formations. These efforts also help the United States Army in our country's efforts to deter adversaries and reassure allies. So Army Guard 4.0 requires change. It requires sacrifice and commitment and a discipline focused on readiness. And it is necessary for our Army and for our nation. One of the most critical challenges throughout the Army National Guard is communicating the new realities about Army Guard 4.0, including why it is needed. We are obligated to clearly and accurately inform our soldiers, their families, and employers. We have to clearly communicate to our citizen soldiers what is expected of them and why, and they will always answer the call. We have met with media and we've developed informational pamphlets, command information articles, and a video that's been utilized through social media. We also have a website devoted to Army National Guard 4.0. You can see it at nationalguard.mil. We are well aware that our citizen soldiers, with their families and with their employers, are what are our strength, and that's our trust and our bond. We fully understand soldiers' daily obligations are to their spouses and their children, as well as to their civilian employers. That's how they provide for their families through their civilian careers. Many of you in this room are industry partners, and I believe you understand the value of hiring reserve component soldiers. So I thank you for all you do to provide such opportunities, and thank you especially allowing them to take that time to complete professional military education and to be there for the units during collective training. Because you are part of our Army National Guard family and our Army family, and we're working hard to keep you informed of how Army Guard 4.0 impacts you as well. Many of our soldiers join the Army National Guard additionally due to the excellent education benefits we offer both at the federal and state level. So they have a little bit different obligation. Students might also have civilian jobs and families, so we have to be aware of all these challenges that our soldiers face. So when I go out and I speak to our Army National Guard soldiers, such as young privates, specialists, and sergeants going through the CTC rotations, I ask them how they feel about additional training days, as well as the likelihood of deployments. These soldiers assure me that they want to train, they want to deploy, and they say that is why they joined the Army National Guard. But still, we have to keep asking our troops how they're doing. We have to be mindful that there is a breaking point somewhere to the number of days they can commit when not mobilized and deployed. We do not want to strain those relationships that they have with their families and with their employers, and we do not want to strain the relationship that we have with our soldiers. We want to make sure that we build strong relationships with families, their schools, and their employers. We have to be predictable, transparent, and upfront with them so they can successfully plan their personal lives and their civilian careers. Our model is about people. It's about our Minuteman. It's our official symbol. The Minuteman has his plow and he has his musket. He cannot operate both at the same time. If we ask him to pick up and carry the musket, he will have to drop his plow. We can't take anything for granted in an unpredictable world. We have to give our Army National Guard soldiers and our soldiers what they need to succeed in case we have to ask them to drop their plows. More than ever, we have to be smart about how we train and utilize our soldiers. We need to find the optimal balance of commitments and how to avoid pushing our soldiers avoid pushing our soldiers past what they, their families, and civilian employers can handle. That's part of our force's latest evolution. We are committed to taking concrete steps in advancing the culture of change within our organization. We appreciate all the assistance we received from so many in this room, and we ask for your continued assistance in making the total Army successful. So that's where we are in this new era that we call Army National Guard 4.0. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll be happy to take questions if we have time. Citizen soldiers at the ready, Army strong. Thank you.
Just give me a second, sir, while I squeeze through here.
Morning, General Kadavy. Courtney
Morning.
McBride, inside the Army. A couple of questions for you. The Army National Guard's retaining 4 Apache battalions. Each of those is going to have 18 aircraft versus 24 in the active component. I understand that the Guard is going to cross-level Apaches to support deployments. What are the challenges associated with that, and what does that look like? And secondly, you talked about increasing CTC rotations and increased Guard participation in exercises. Wondering whether the Guard is also participating in EDRES and CDRES. Okay,
so thank you. If I missed part of I think it's a 3-part question. If I missed any part, feel free to remind me. First, yeah, we have 18 aircraft in 4 battalions. The Army's made that decision to retain, and we've announced which 4 battalions that we'll be retaining. And this has been, we talk about a marathoner having a heart surgery while they're running. So while we were making these decisions and determining which ones we were going to keep and how we were going to sustain and maintain readiness, we've already deployed the first one. The first of the 151 from South Carolina has been in Afghanistan, I think, for 4 or 5 months now. The first of the 130th from North Carolina is preparing to mobilize here in the next few months. So we're already doing that. And so, yeah, we've had to cross-level aircraft, one to ensure the battalion that deploys is at 24, and then ensure that the one that is preparing has adequate aircraft to do both individual training and the collective level training. And so that comes at the expense of the other 2. And so we push airplanes around. That's not anything new for the Army or for the Army National Guard. I think as an Army, we realize there's going to be some readiness and some training challenges related to 18 of 24. And so we're thinking about how to operate through that. Part 2, CTCs and IDRES. So yeah, we have been doing the combat training centers for the last 2-3 years. We've done 1 CTC, 1 NTC, 1 JRTC. While we haven't been engaged in the IDRES to date, we will be in the future as we develop the plans and identify the units that will be associated with those. But to this point, not yet. But we are mobilizing almost 25,000 soldiers this year. And so that muscle movement, similar to the IDRES, we are doing some of that. But really what the IDRES is about is checking our ability to respond to contingencies quicker than as I talked about, the known demand, those named operations. That's a 2-year notification of sourcing, and so you can use overseas contingency dollars to generate readiness over 2 years. And so Army Guard 4.0 is about being ready for contingencies, and it's about reduced notification time. So we have to maintain the readiness prior to mobilization, and that's a different model for us as we focus more on readiness prior to mobilization. Did I miss any pieces? Okay, thanks.
Excuse me, I got to squeeze through here again.
Gina Cavallaro, Army Magazine. Hurricane season starts in less than a month. Anything new for preparing for that?
So every year we do lessons learned. We try to get better at response, and that usually means responding quicker and in packages that can assist states. But we generally wait for the state to determine the requirement. Every hurricane's a little bit different. We lean forward. We identify forces available as we respond nationally from different states through the EMAC, Emergency Management Assistance Compact, that most of the states use. And there's always exercises that we do at the joint level between the Army Guard and the Air Guard to ensure that we understand the processes and the states are trained of how to ask for assistance from other states. So I think we're well prepared for that.
Okay. Got one in the back.
Morning, sir. Keith June from Leidos. Thank you very much, and thank AUSA for putting us on this morning. I want to get your thoughts on the Stand Up the Army's Future Command and the cross-functional teams and the ongoing efforts with the Army for modernization and its impact on the Guard. Over.
Well, we're supportive. I'm really the wrong person to ask. There's a lot more knowledgeable people in the room and within the Army. What we are doing in the Army National Guard is we're supportive, and we're looking for ways to engage and, as a total Army, provide information and input as future forces and the future Army will impact, Army National Guard. It may lead to Army Guard 5.0. I don't know yet, but we'll see what happens with that. But I don't have much more to add. I mean, there are obviously other people that can give you better information on where Futures Command's going. Yeah.
Hi, Lauren Williams with Federal Computer Week. I wanted to know if there were any cyber updates. The draft House NDAA for fiscal 2019 indicates that they might be leaning on the Guard and Reserve to beef up cyber efforts, particularly on the state level. So I wanted to know if there were any efforts moving towards that.
I mean, we have taken some steps over the last 12 to 18 months to increase cyber capacity and capability within the Army National Guard. So last September, we stood up our first cyber brigade with 5 battalions. We have the 11 cyber protection teams that have already been stationed, and we're generating the readiness in those. Additionally, we have provided each and every state a small cell of 10 soldiers that we call the Defensive Cyber Operation Element to assist states in protection of their Army National Guard networks and to ensure there's capacity and capability if a state asks for assistance from their National Guard.
Sir, Jeff Landau, Caliber. Can you comment on Southwest Border? How's it going and how you see it in the short term?
Sure. So we are in the process of working with the 4 states who are working with Customs and Border Patrol and OSD to determine the overall requirements for each one of those 4 states, and we are assisting with the funding to ensure the states have what they need, and where they need capacity or capability from other states, we are assisting with finding the right soldiers and the right capabilities and the right skill sets to assist in that mission.
Other questions? Let's have a big round of applause for Lieutenant General Kadavy.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.